He speaks in visions, grand ones, plans that shimmer with possibility, futures that glitter with genius. He's magnetic, articulate, even intoxicating, especially when he talks about what's coming next. And it always sounds beautiful. But somehow, nothing ever arrives. He's always preparing, always evolving, always almost ready. To the world, he's captivating, a dreamer, a free spirit, a nonconformist who refuses to be tied down. But you see something else. Missed deadlines, emotional disappearances, moments where joy turns suddenly to despair. He's not dancing through life. He's hiding. His freedom is an escape plan. His charm, a smoke screen. This is not a quirk. It's not just immaturity or bad timing. Carl Jung had a name for it. Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. A man who never truly grows up. Not because he can't, but because he won't. Because to grow up is to submit to reality, to let the dream touch earth. And he would rather lose everything than let that happen. He doesn't lack intelligence. He lacks integration. The Puer Aeternus, Latin for eternal boy, is not just an immature man. He's a psychological pattern, a man possessed by possibility, but paralyzed by responsibility. He has visions of changing the world, but struggles to answer emails. He wants the peak without the climb, the legacy without the labor. Jung didn't describe the pure as lazy. He described him as exiled, from structure, from time, from the slow, steady rhythm of maturity. He resists form because form feels like death. He avoids stability because it feels like a cage. His life is a museum of half-built dreams, each more dazzling than the last, and each abandoned when reality knocked on the door. He lives in someday, in what he'll do when things finally align. He keeps you in limbo with promises of the future, while quietly refusing to enter the present. The poor doesn't fail because he can't succeed. He fails because success requires sacrifice, and sacrifice terrifies him. He fears becoming ordinary more than he fears becoming nothing at all. He says he's not made for this world, that his soul is too wild, too visionary, too untamable. But the truth is simpler, more human, and far less poetic. He is afraid of commitment, of routine, of the quiet weight of showing up day after day when the applause fades. He calls it spiritual freedom. Jung would call it a flight from reality. The Puer Aeternus doesn't live outside the system because he's enlightened. He lives there because he's terrified of structure. Structure demands responsibility. It demands choice. And choice means closing the door to infinite possibility, which to him feels like death. So he romanticizes impermanence, glorifies chaos, frames avoidance as wisdom. But beneath the incense and the ideals, there's a child playing dress-up in a man's body. His spontaneity isn't soul-led. It's sabotage in disguise. He doesn't want to be trapped in the world, but he has no problem trapping others in his uncertainty. You'll find yourself orbiting his potential, waiting for a version of him that never arrives. Because freedom, to him, means never growing up. And anyone who asks him to grow will be accused of caging his soul. He was told he was special, gifted, destined for more, and he believed it, not because it was true, but because it felt safer than ordinary pain. But the problem with being filled with potential is that eventually you must do something with it. And when you don't, that potential curdles. It turns into shame, avoidance, and a desperate clinging to the future. The Puer Aeternus doesn't fear failure. He fears limits. He fears discovering where his magic ends. So he stays in motion, keeps the dream alive, never planting roots deep enough to risk disappointment. He's not lazy. He's terrified. Because once you act, you risk exposing the gap between who you thought you'd be and who you actually are. And that kind of reckoning feels like death to the ego. Jung warned that the shadow grows strongest where there is disowned potential. When the dream becomes a shrine, it becomes untouchable, and so he protects it by never trying. He confuses preservation with purpose. But the dream that is never grounded becomes a burden, one that haunts instead of guides, because what once gave him hope now chains him to a life he refuses to begin. He doesn't want a partner. He wants a savior, a therapist, a mother who will never abandon him, no matter how much he retreats into boyhood. You think you're in love? But what you're really in is a pattern, one where his chaos becomes your responsibility, one where your empathy becomes a leash. At first it feels sacred. He opens up like no one else has. He tells you you're the only one who understands him. But slowly, you begin to bend. You explain for him, make excuses for him. You soften your needs so he doesn't feel pressure. And without realizing it, you become the container for everything he refuses to hold. Jung warned of the great devouring mother, the archetype that consumes under the guise of care. But he also warned of the man who unconsciously seeks her. When the eternal boy meets the overgiver, both vanish into each other. One avoids growing up, the other avoids being abandoned, and what was once love becomes mutual depletion. You wanted partnership. What you got was a role you never auditioned for. He promises the world, then vanishes before the first brick is laid. He speaks of futures so vivid they feel real, but they dissolve the moment action is required. You find yourself holding the weight of his words while he drifts, untethered by responsibility. His dreams are castles in the sky, and you are the scaffolding. You believed him, not just because you wanted to, but because he believed himself. In that moment, his sincerity wasn't a lie. It was a flicker of who he wanted to be. But desire without discipline is still abandonment. And so you wait, you forgive, you support, until one day you realize you are exhausted from carrying someone who never learned to stand. Loving him becomes a quiet erosion. You shrink your needs to preserve his comfort. You silence your instincts to avoid being too much. And somewhere along the way, your compassion mutates into captivity. This is not love. This is self-betrayal in the name of potential. And the longer you stay, the more you forget that love isn't meant to feel like loneliness. At first, he lit up every room. His spontaneity was magnetic, his words electric. But over time, the glow dims. What once felt like freedom now feels like avoidance. What once felt like passion now feels like volatility. The spark is still there, but now it burns out faster than it ignites. You realize it wasn't energy. It was chaos dressed in charisma. He blames burnout. He blames the world. He blames timing, but never himself. The excuses loop like background music, familiar, soothing, and slowly maddening. Promises become placeholders. Apologies become rituals. And behind each one is the same unspoken belief. I'm different. I don't need to change. I just need to be understood. But the consequences grow. Missed opportunities, broken relationships, emotional debts that keep piling up. He drifts from job to job, friend to friend, fantasy to fantasy, still convinced the world just doesn't get him. But it does. It always has. The world is not confused. It's tired, just like you. There comes a moment when even the dreamer can no longer outrun his reflection. The patterns repeat too loudly. The world no longer bends to his story. And the people who once protected him, the ones who softened every landing, begin to walk away. This is the breaking point. Not a breakdown, a breakthrough. Jung wrote that real growth requires a symbolic death. And for the Puer Aeternus, that death is devastating. It means letting the fantasy burn, letting the mother archetype go, letting the illusion of specialness dissolve. This is not a gentle process. It is a crucifixion of the ego, a psychic unraveling of everything he used to hide from responsibility. But on the other side of that death is something sacred. The man, not the hero of an imagined destiny, but the builder of a real one. Not the adored child waiting to be saved, but the grounded adult who chooses to stay. The boy dies. The man begins. And in that silent resurrection, freedom finally has weight. You were never meant to kill the child within you, only to take the reins from his trembling hands. The mistake is thinking maturity means extinction, when in truth, it means integration. The dreamer was never the problem. The problem was letting him drive without a map, without a mission, without a spine. Maturity is not the death of creativity. It's its discipline. It's when the ideas that once scattered like sparks finally meet structure and become fire. The inner child sees the mountain. The adult climbs it. One imagines. The other commits. This is where magic becomes movement, where vision stops floating and begins to walk. To grow is not to abandon the boy. It is to guide him, to say, yes, we will still dream, but now we will also build. Yes, we will still feel, but we will not be ruled by feeling. This is the silent moment when chaos bows to clarity, and the man within you is no longer just a possibility. He is present and permanent. Freedom isn't the absence of weight. It's choosing which weight to carry. You were told that to be free is to float, to drift above it all, untouched and unbothered. But that's not freedom. That's avoidance dressed in poetry. Real freedom plants its feet. It says, I will not run. I will not wait. I will meet life unflinching. The adult doesn't ask for permission to begin. He begins, not because he feels ready, but because he knows that readiness is a myth sold to those afraid to start. Growth isn't graceful. It's gritty. It means showing up when the fantasy still beckons. It means choosing the real over the beautiful lie, the mountain over the mirage. This is where the boy ends and the man begins, not with a ceremony, not with applause, but with a quiet decision to stay, to stand, to act, because life isn't waiting, and neither should you. The door has always been open. The only thing left is to walk through it. And remember, the next video picks up where we left off here. Awakening builds upon each video. See you in the next one.